Minecraft, but you can craft custom swords out of the new cave update items. That's right. In today's video, we're going to be crafting custom swords out of the new items and blocks that were added in the 1.17 update. As always, these new swords come with crazy custom abilities and unique attributes to them. These range from the deadly Amethyst crystal sword to the somewhat less powerful but still useful moss sword. But that's not all. Today's update added 36 new swords to the pack. You can learn about that more a little bit later in the video. Alright, so technically 48 new swords were added to the pack in this update. There are 16 stained glass swords, and then there are the 36 other swords that are pretty crazy and useful. Today's update video is going to focus on the 6 new 1.17 block swords, as well as the stained glass sword. So those are the Amethyst sword, the moss sword, the deep slate sword, the dripstone sword, copper sword, and tough sword. But I just want to mention, so all of these swords here can be downloaded by anyone. However, a lot of the other swords, the other 30 on this wall over here, these are currently Patron exclusive. So you need to be donating $1 or more to me on Patreon in the iCard in the top right. This includes the 30 other swords that are in this update but not available to non-patrons, as well as all of the in-game recipes for every single sword so you can see how to make them in-game. You can of course view these on the website as well, but if you want to have them in-game, you do need to be supporting me on Patreon. And of course, these 30 swords will be released over time. It just might be a couple months until they are all released. So the 30 of them that are currently in the pack for patrons are the Blaze Sword, the Ender Eye Sword, the Golden Carrot Sword, Chain Sword, Bell Sword, Bookshelf Sword, Sand Sword, Brick Sword, Diorite Sword, the Potato Sword, the Sea Pickle Sword, Hay Bale Sword, the Melon Slicer, Pumpkin Sword, Netherrack Sword, we have a Sign Sword, Bamboo Sword, Sapling Sword, Mycelium Sword, Snow Sword, Ender Stone Sword, or Endstone Sword, Cobweb Sword, Note Block Sword, Carrot Sword, Glowberry Sword, Flower Pot Sword, and then Glass Pane, and then we have the Beacon Sword, the Anvil Sword, and the Conduit Sword. So again, you can support me on Patreon, help the channel out, and then get access to all of these swords immediately. And with that out of the way, let's jump into the 6 new swords as well as the 16 retextured glass swords that are in the update. And to get started, we have all of the stained glass swords. You can see that their recipes are the exact same as the regular glass sword, but yeah, they're basically just aesthetic versions of the glass sword. So like you could get different colored glass swords and they will work exactly the same. So if we spawn in a couple mobs and we go to use this, you'll see that once we have actually damaged the sword a little bit, it's going to start causing bleeding on the mob that you're attacking. And the more damaged this sword is, so like the lower durability it has left, the more damage that mob will take. And so all of these swords behave exactly the same. Their colors don't cause any differences, but regardless, they look pretty cool. Alright, so next up is the Amethyst sword, and this one is really cool in my opinion. When you hit a mob, it will cause this little amethyst bud to appear on the ground, and after a short time it will explode and deal damage to all of the nearby mobs. So if these guys didn't spread out too much, you'll see that a lot of them can take damage. And it actually deals a pretty good amount of damage. So yeah, you can kill a pretty good amount of mobs with one hit. And I think one of the interesting things about this sword in particular, especially in how it differentiates itself from, say, like the TNT sword, is that because these crystals stay around for a little bit of time and then explode, you end up kind of leaving like landmines on the battlefield that players and mobs would have to avoid. Moving right along, we have the Moss Sword. And this one, when you hit a mob, it will place some moss carpets randomly into the world. This could allow you to make moss farms and just overall, it's a way to obtain these moss carpets that is different than normal. Of course, the sword itself, pretty weak, only does 3 damage, but yeah, that's about it. And next up we have the Deep Slate Sword. So this one only appears to do 4 damage. Pretty weak, that is the same as a wooden sword. However, it will deal more damage the lower we are in the world. So, suppose I gave us night vision so we can actually see, and we find a cave. You can see that this is clearly at Deep Slate level because we have, well, Deep Slate here. And so when we attack, you'll see we are now dealing 7 attack damage instead of 4. So this bumps it up to being a diamond sword level attack damage. Obviously, it's still Deep Slate, so it's super easy to find and shouldn't be the most strong sword in the game. But overall, this basically allows you to get a really early diamond sword in your playthroughs that, if you take to the surface, is all of a sudden not very useful. Next, sword. Okay, the next sword is the Dripstone sword. The Dripstone sword is pretty cool. When you hit a mob, it will cause a sharpened, pointed dripstone to fall from the sky and hurt the mob. You can see it doesn't have very high durability, so you don't get to hit mobs too often with it, but it is quite powerful because, well, you get to hit them with a 2 damaging sword and then drop a pointed dripstone on them, which can deal a lot of damage. The main weakness that this sword has is that if we summon like a cow or whatever, when we hit it, it's probably going to end up running away from where the dripstone is actually falling and dodging the attack. Where for the husk, because it's coming directly for us, it ends up walking into the path of the falling dripstone. So this sword doesn't necessarily hit its opponent. The same case might be on a player, which, by the way, this can hit a player. Like, I just took 4 hearts of damage because the dripstone hit me. But yeah, you have to be careful of that. Okay, and then the next sword is the Tough Sword. And the Tough Sword is, well, it's a tough sword. It's, well, it's a stone sword, so 5 damage. Yeah, stone sword. But it has really high durability. So suppose we're in survival mode, we attack a mob. You'll see it has 2,000 durability, same as a netherite sword, because it's so tough. Yeah, I know, guys, it probably wasn't very funny, but I made the joke anyway. Okay, and last but certainly not least is the Copper Sword, and as you can see, it's already actually changed textures on me. So that's because when you hold the Copper Sword, over time it will get oxidized, and as it becomes more and more oxidized, it will deal more and more poison damage to the mobs that you hit with it. However, when I do hit a mob with this Copper Sword, some of the oxidization is going to rub off essentially on that mob and it will go down a state. So this is a sword that essentially is like, it has to charge up over time, but once it is fully charged, and I had to edit out some of that because it's pretty slow, but once you hit a mob with it, you'll see they take a lot of damage. Like, this husk, I believe, is going to die. Okay, I was wrong. This husk almost died. And as you can see, like, me swinging the sword, I mean, I've already lost 2 oxidization states. I'm going to have to wait almost a minute to get the full effect back. But yeah, I copied some of these so we can see that again. You can see if I, like, crit the husk, it's going to take a lot of damage. Like, this is a seriously painful weapon. So, yeah. And, again, so you can have multiple of these going. You can see, like, when I just mashed it on this husk, it's now just a regular copper sword again. It's no longer fully oxidized. Well, that's pretty much all the content I have for this video. I hope you can appreciate all of the time and effort that I put into this. All of these swords here clearly had a lot of thought put into them and some pretty unique abilities, way more than a lot of my old swords, honestly. And the other 30 that you can get if you're a patron of mine, they have a lot of the same thought and effort put into them. So if you're looking forward to that, you can make sure to subscribe to future videos that will contain all of these swords in them. However, you can always just support me on Patreon. It is $1 to gain access to a whole ton of features. There are the 30 new swords, all of the in-game recipes of this pack, more bows, as well as 20 new crossbows, more shovels, an exclusive pack, more axes, an exclusive pack. Sorry, I'm like counting on my fingers right now because there's just so much content that you could be getting for, you know, this data pack and a ton of other stuff. So anyway, I hope you do consider that. And if you did support me, I very much so thank you. Anyway, that is all I have for today's video. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the very next video. Thanks for watching.